My name is Aaron Robb. I'm principal at Wahconah Regional High School. On behalf of our superintendent, Lori Caston, I'm here to welcome you to Becket, Washington School for our second community forum for the Wahconah School Building Project. Just a couple brief things, and then we're going to let our friends from the design team take over.
I'm going to be standing here.
We are in the midst. We are in the midst of what is called a feasibility study, and we're basically doing a couple of different things, including narrowing down design choices for a new or renovated Wahconah. Carl from DRA is going to talk a lot more about that in just a moment. Also, I would like to take a moment just to recognize, and if I could just have people raise their hands in just a second, those people that are on the Wahconah School Building Committee from this particular community or from any other community. So we've got a few Wahconah School Building Committee members here, and then when we break out into smaller groups, we'll disperse among the tables to help answer any questions you may have. The purpose of this is basically a forum. Half of the presentation is going to be an update on where we are so far, and the other half is going to be soliciting input from all of you as citizens and taxpayers and families regarding the project. That's the most important part of the night. That's the part that Carl will speak more to in just a moment. But we really need your input and your thoughts. Some of the input and thoughts that we got from the first round of community forums very much made its way into some of the plans that we have for a new or renovated Wahconah. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Carl from DRA.
Thank you. Here's sort of the organization of this project. As Aaron mentioned, and you saw that long list of names, there's a great building committee that's formed with representatives from all the communities in the region, as well as administrators and others like Aaron, by their position, are also on the committee. And then the district has hired an owner's project manager who helps guide this process. They've also hired us, DRA, as architects and engineers for the project. Carl Blackbeard's here. John Tingle Gibson's here also from our office as well. And there's also, I'd like to point out, this somewhat invisible partner too. Those initials stand for Massachusetts School Building Authority. And they're partners here partly because they kind of set the guidelines for how this process should work, but they also provide about roughly half the funding for the project too comes from the state. The other half will come from the district. And they are reimbursing this feasibility study phase of the project too. And to put things in context, the feasibility study has these sort of three basic steps. We've already finished the first one. We turned this in May, called the Preliminary Design Program. That was really focused on education and getting the district, the administrators, teachers, building committee to think about, how does teaching and learning want to happen in this district? Without thinking about whether it's a new building, an existing building, or renovation, just, thinking about it in the context of, it's a pretty straightforward way of doing it. The state asks, how are you teaching and learning today, and how would you like to be doing it in the future? At the same time, we were also looking at the existing conditions of the existing Wahconah High School, and we started developing alternative solutions, and I'll share those with you in a moment. But we're in this phase right now where we're looking to develop what's called the preferred alternative. So out of all those alternatives, we want to get down to, by September, if you can read that little break, it says September, one option as the best option to address these needs and to address the educational program. And we're going to do that by revisiting the education plan, responding to comments that the state has because they review it and have some comments. We want to update that. We're going to evaluate the alternatives. You're going to help us with that today. Actually, we'll share that with you. And then arrive at a preferred solution. After that, there's one more step where we take that one solution and we elaborate on it to the point where we can do a very good cost estimate, a very more detailed cost estimate than we can do right now. Right now, we're talking about sort of order of magnitude costs and ranges because we don't have details yet as to what each of these options might be. But at the end of this phase, in February of next year, we will have that level of detail. We'll know the full scope of the project, we'll know the schedule for it, and the budget. And it's at that point that we would then move on and get formal approval from the state, and then present it to the region for a regional vote. And it is a regional vote because this is a regional school district, so all the communities vote at once, and the votes are tallied together, and 51% carries the day in that context. The way, the objective tonight, though, during this phase of the project is we're looking for input. These are sessions that in addition to our work directly with the administration or work directly with the building committee, these are very valuable to us as designers. You know this district well, you know the building well. You may or may not have students there or gone to the school yourself. We appreciate your feedback in that regard, and we want to integrate it into our decision-making process. And so this isn't the last time you'll see us either. We'll be back again during the fall, back in September, October. We'll have another series of community meetings, and certainly in preparation for this regional vote, there'll be a whole another set of kinds of presentations that are in a lot more varied context too at that point in time. And this district's also very good at getting the word out, through social media or on their website or in the newspapers. So please, I'll put up a list of those at the end. But be on the lookout for those too. The project gets well covered. Here's that process in another sort of form. To develop the education plan, we went through a process like this, where a lot of people gathered for a couple days a few months ago, working on that education plan in what are called sort of visioning sessions. We're trying to envision what the future should be for the district and how teaching and learning should happen. It is changing, it is evolving. It's not the same as all of us went to school in necessarily. And the format for those sessions is somewhat the format we're going to follow tonight, where we'll have a bit of presentation, then we'd like to break into some small groups where we can gather around the table and have feedback and kind of record various thoughts. So that'll feed into helping develop the criteria, sort of objective criteria, to help evaluate these options. So we're not just reacting emotionally or subjectively. And we're at the point now where we're narrowing this to a short list to get down to one alternative that becomes the project that's carried forward. Just to recap, some of the thoughts that came out of the visioning session was this notion that Wahconah does offer a wide variety of opportunities in the current school that certainly we want to the best we can continue, even though it's a relatively small high school. If you look, across the state, we're designing for less than 500 students in grades 9 through 12. It's on the small side of schools, and that has some challenges. But we want to try and maintain this and this principle here. And these are some of the other principles. I won't go into all of them, but these are some of the concepts that were developed out of those visioning sessions. And it's in this document. It's about, there are 30, 40 pages or so, the education plan. That embodies some of these things. Some of the key words, maybe you'll see flexibility, you'll see 21st century mentioned a few times here, and more specifically under learning modalities, different styles of learning. Students are not as often, and sometimes not at all, just sitting in rows listening to a teacher lecture to them anymore. Oftentimes, that takes up maybe 5 or 10 minutes out of class time, and then they break up into smaller groups or work on projects, doing collaboration. Sometimes it's not just one subject, but 2 subjects will get together and do interdisciplinary kinds of learning. And so they're doing a lot of these things now at Wahconah, or trying to. Sometimes the building, the facility, or the environment gets in the way of doing it to the best that they could be. And one of the other points too, that school is not just about kind of intellectual learning, particularly in these days where any information you want, you can sort of Google it, right? If you just want pure information, that's not what learning's about necessarily anymore. There's also the social emotional aspect of people coming together, interpersonal development and so forth that needs to be recognized. And also another important word here is student engagement. that the environment can go a long way to helping students and sometimes teachers feel engaged with the learning that's going on there. If the environment is supportive and bright and friendly and welcoming and so forth. There are other kinds of ways that can happen. A couple of diagrams were also part of the education plan. These are kind of important guiding us going forward. One of them has to do with arranging the classroom portion, the academic portions of the building in kind of pods or clusters, not necessarily along a traditional corridor with similar sized rooms on each side. The notion is that for one, there are different sized classrooms, some large, some small, and they're organized around a collaborative area where students can do some of those different activities when they're not sitting in rows listening to a teacher, or they need to gather in smaller groups or work with another class or something. Also notice there's a science lab as part of that. So this implies that the school might not be organized the way it traditionally has been, where all the math rooms are together and all the English rooms are together and all the science rooms are together. This implies that the science rooms may be distributed in the building. And again, these diagrams are done regardless of whether this is going to be a renovation of the existing building or new construction. These are still sort of the idealized diagrams that were part of the education plan. Also notice there's a teacher's room as part of this, because that too, it's a small notion in some ways, but it's important that encourages teachers to work together, collaborate, because they have a common planning area. They don't just stay in a classroom all day, where they may be teaching 5 out of 6 periods or 4 out of 6 periods, and in those other 2 periods they sit in their classroom, do their planning or correct papers, or in this notion, the resources would be there, copy machines, and even a little kitchenette. That it would be a professional kind of work environment, but multiple teachers would share that. And they'd each have their own personal workspace, but in one room where they could come together and collaborate. And then if you expand this notion to the scale of the building, you take those classroom clusters and organize them. It would take about 4 of them to satisfy the enrollment of the high school. They could be organized around what today is called a library media center, but in sort of 21st century thinking, it's more of a learning commons, because there are a lot fewer books and a lot more different activities going on there, and it's a really shared space, so that all these students, all these clusters could take advantage of it and have access to it. And then also notice in part of this diagram is that this is the academic side of the school. This is sort of more the, you might say, public side of the school, where the auditorium and music and gym and locker rooms, and also the cafeteria or student commons are here. And that's partly recognizing that this wants to be a welcoming facility for the community, that they can easily use it, and these are community kinds of facilities. And the academic side could be easily locked off. And these spaces are often used on a different kind of schedule than the academic side. They're open, evenings and weekends and so forth. A couple other important notions here is that there may be multiple access points into the building, but there should be one main entrance for visitors, which offers good control right next to the administration area for security and safety and so forth. And then it recognizes you need to get service into areas as well. And this is the case for kitchen. There's obviously a mechanical space and so forth as well in the diagram. So this is kind of, you might say, the start of thinking from a planning point of view, but it's not really literally meant to be a floor plan yet. Here is the floor plan of the current school. And unfortunately, it does have some of that notion of, repetitive classrooms all along the corridor. It doesn't have that variety of spaces. It doesn't have collaborative spaces. It is organized by a department right now. These are the science rooms, and other rooms are grouped together: language and history and math and business and Becket. They're all in wings of the building. The building is kind of spread out right now, even though it's a relatively small school in terms of enrollment. It is kind of spread out. And so part of our analysis also looked at, from a space point of view, how do these current spaces meet today's standards? Both, square footage standards and other kinds of standards. And the color coding here means red is sort of like a traffic light. Red is bad and green is good. Yellow is kind of marginal. So the red spaces are kind of below standards, below current standards. The green ones are at standards, and you can see that there's a lot of red and yellow spaces here that are a little bit small. Some of the yellow ones are a little bit small. Some of the red ones, particularly the sign flags, are significantly smaller than they should be for the numbers of students and the kinds of activities, particularly the way science is taught these days. And there are a few spaces missing as well. I mean, some of the administration is very tight. There's not a real good conference room in there. The privacy between the nurse and guidance is kind of lacking because they're sort of squeezed into very tight adjacent spaces. There's no weight and fitness room, which most high schools have, or even an auxiliary kind of gym where they can teach yoga, which they do teach. They end up doing it in the hallways or something right now. So there are some missing pieces as well. And you may also know there are some modular classrooms too that were put there, I think, in the 70s, and they're still there. And they're, have outlived their kind of useful lifespan as a building too. So there's a summary of some of those deficiencies there. So there are issues with the existing school, both educationally and somewhat, and from a facilities point of view, that need to be addressed. So part of our analysis was looking at all these physical conditions. So a team of our architects and engineers have gone through the building pretty exhaustively, and outside too, in the fields, the parking lots as well, to evaluate for all of these kinds of aspects. And there are some issues. The building is approaching 60 years old. It's lacking in modern kinds of systems. A lot of those materials are still original. The windows, they have tried to add storm windows, but there's still single pane windows in places. Very leaky from an energy point of view, unfortunately. And some of those other issues that you can see there. Likewise, on the interior, there's some materials that are deficient, ceilings, floor tiles, the auditorium seats, some of them have been refurbished, a lot of them haven't. There are accessibility issues, even though it's a one-story building. There are some different levels, like a stage where they sort of makeshift have got some access there. It's really not fully compliant. Some changes in grade in the corridors, stairs, and so forth that would need to be addressed in a renovation. And there are still some asbestos tiles and other materials that would need to come out in a renovation scenario as well. They're not hazardous in the sense that students are exposed to them, but in a renovation project, they would need to come out. And then this kind of summarizes too the state of mechanical electrical systems, is that a lot of them are at the end of their useful life. Some parts have been replaced. It's getting harder and harder to find parts to some of these things. And again, if we were to do a renovation, or even if we weren't to do a renovation, the district is going to have some repairs and some improvements that are going to be needed in the coming years. And the final part of that education plan is a space summary form. It's a state form that looks like this, that lists every space in the building, either now or that's proposed. And this first column lists how many of those spaces and how large are they today in terms of area. The middle column is what's proposed, and this third set of columns is what the state guidelines are for those spaces. And it's a form that the state uses to sort of compare their guidelines against what is proposed. Because they do try to keep a lid on these projects, so to speak, from a budget point of view, and that relates directly sometimes, usually to how much space is being built or renovated. And so they look at the enrollment, and the district and the state have agreed that the design enrollment for this project is 460 students. So what that results in is, here's a quick summary in narrative form of how many classrooms, science labs, and some of the other special spaces that are in the proposed space summary. And again, that's done independently of whether it's a renovation project or new construction. That space summary is kind of matching the education plan and saying this is what we would like in the future. And it adds up right now to about 128,000 square feet. The current building is about 114,000 square feet. So because of some of those small spaces, that's why there's, even though the enrollment, the projected enrollment is slightly below what the current enrollment is, the building is still small in terms of square footage for the future. So here are the options that we've developed that we'd like some feedback on tonight. First of all, base repair is not truly an option because it doesn't address any of the educational issues really. It only addresses repairing all those things that are deficient and or substandard. So it includes like replacing all the windows, replacing the roof, upgrading the envelope of the building, replacing the finishes that are worn out and deficient, addressing accessibility, things like that. So it's a good baseline to compare with because in one sense, all of that scope of work is going to be in any renovation project for one, but also base repair also gives the district and you all kind of a guideline to say if nothing happened in the future, if no project happened, you still are going to be responsible for certain repairs going forward. They're not going to go away, they're not going to fix themselves, so to speak. And so there is some work to be done on the building, and that's it. As I say, even without addressing the educational issues there. So of the true options, we developed 4 options that are in the category of addition renovation, and we developed 9 options that are new construction. And for each of them, we developed the conceptual floor plans, site plans, and phasing. Phasing means how would the solution be implemented? You know, kids need to continue to go to school there. How could renovation happen? How could new construction happen? We need to think about that at this point. So using that information and some very basic criteria of how well does each of those, there were 13 options there, how well do those 13 options address the education plan? How well do they fit how well do they utilize the site in the existing building? And then what are the disruption aspects to it or phasing implications of each of those solutions? So on a preliminary basis, we've narrowed down all those options down to 5 that we'll share with you tonight. These were the 4 addition renovation options, but after that preliminary evaluation, we're down to these 2. They're sort of the 2 extremes almost. This one, number 1, retains the entire existing building, except for the modulars, those go away, and builds a small piece of new construction at one end of the building by the soccer field. This option saves only the gymnasium, auditorium, and kind of the linking piece of the administration area, and builds all new academic areas kind of wrapping around the gym. And then once those areas are built, the existing building is demolished and replaced with new athletic fields. In this option, the site layout and configuration changes very little. There's still a drop off in front of the parking area, and the athletic fields remain more or less in the same place. So those are the 2 addition renovation options that we're carrying forward, and there are plans of them on these tables that you can look at closer when we get to that point. Just to walk you through that briefly though, this is that one that adds a piece here at the end, sort of completing the corridors now so there's no longer dead-end corridors. And in that piece of new construction, there would be some classrooms, some science lab, some small spaces, some open collaborative spaces. So you can start to see that we're trying to develop those classroom clusters there, but still retaining and respecting, you might say, the layout of the existing building. So the corridors are still there, and in some cases some classrooms are still there, but you'll see there's more variety of spaces now, and some classrooms are even taken away here, opening up those collaborative areas. And we've also distributed the science labs. So there's one here, 2 of them here, 1 of them over here, so that it maps that education plan onto the existing building. The other thing to note here is that all the core spaces, the gym, the cafeteria, the auditorium, the library, which becomes learning home, they all remain in their same locations. And they would get renovated during the summers, hopefully, as much as possible, so that during the school year, the students are not, lacking in those areas. But to build this, you can imagine, it's going to take some phasing, some breaking it into smaller pieces, because yes, a contractor could build this new space while the existing school stays in operation. We put some barriers up here at the end of the quarters. We have to come up with some alternative egress temporarily, but this new space, for the most part, could be built. We'd have to come up with site access to get back there. But once that's built, it could be occupied as swing space. We want to free up, say, a wing like this here. And to do that, in addition to this space, we would probably, the district would need to rent portable classrooms to vacate some spaces and move kids into those. And the students could be on this side of the building, the contractor could be on that side of the building doing renovation, and so forth. So there might be one piece here, another piece here, another piece here, and then some summer work. We estimate that it would take in the vicinity of 3 years or so to do that kind of renovation project, while the school is occupied. But as I said, the site plan wouldn't change. This is a three-dimensional view of what it looks like. The other option is the one that saves only the gym and locker room at this end, auditorium and music rooms at this end. It proposes converting the administration into art rooms. So now you sort of have art and music together here, and then building all new academic spaces and administration and new entrance wrapping around the existing gym here. And again, the notion would be that this construction would happen while the entire existing school stays in operation. Again, we'd have to come up with some temporary measures, some temporary parking. The drop-off could still remain in front, but we're imposing on the existing parking. The baseball field would be out of commission here, or partially under that here. But once this is built, then the school could move over and occupy that, and then demolition would happen back here. And again, it'd be safely segregated from the building and blocked off, but we'd have to create access to allow the contractor to get back there, because the building couldn't be demolished just during the summer. Some of it would spill into the school year. And here's what that site plan would look like, because we are modifying the drop off a little bit and the parking and baseball fields here. We end up with new parking and drop off areas here, a second drop off and parking area here, with entrances on each side. And then once the building comes down, new fields could be built in those places, so that you end up essentially with the same number of athletic fields there. I should point out too, this anticipates a two-story addition here. So that these are 4 classroom pods, two stacked on top of 2. And that's what it would look like three-dimensionally. So you can see there are 2 stories there. That's the gym, that's the auditorium. This is all 1 story here. So yes, there would be an elevator in there, there would be stairs, it would be fully accessible now. And we looked at new construction options. We wanted to utilize that sort of same philosophy of finding locations where construction could be happening while the existing school stays in operation. And so we identified originally, 6 locations where that might be possible. If you look at the size of that footprint, you can see that these rectangles don't in and of themselves represent, quite, a full building necessarily, but they're generally zones. A zone in front of the building, where the parking lot is, where the baseball field is, adjacent to the building, where the football field is, where the soccer field is. Those are sort of the open areas on campus. By the way, we can't build here because we're too close to the river, and there are now guidelines environmentally that red line is kind of it's not literally no build, but it's kind of no disturb. And then right here, about 100 feet in, is truly no build, no disturb at all. So we can't build on that side of the thing, of the existing building. So we came up with not just 6 alternatives there, but some variations. So it added up to 9 possible solutions, but number 1 relates to that site location number 1, number 6 is site location number 6. But there's some A's and B's in there, that's why we got to 9. But again, after our preliminary evaluation, we thought these 3 showed the most promise satisfying the education plan, the site utilization goals, the least disruptive, and in the case of those 4, 5, and 6, those locations toward the back of the site, those really from an environmental point of view were not advantageous at all. The land there is low, it's kind of wet, there are wetlands back there, it would be difficult to build, there'd be long driveways, long utility runs to get back there, so those in our preliminary analysis fell to the wayside. And these are the 3 we'd like to concentrate on, although we did come up with this variation of this one here. They're very similar in site plan, so we call it A.2, A.1. So there's 2A and 2A.1. So there's really 4 options here and 2 renovations options. So there's, you might say, 6 options still on the table that we'd like feedback on tonight. And just to quickly share them with you, but they are on the plans on these tables, so you can see them. Location number 1 envisions kind of a linear building here that can fit in front of the school, sort of where the drop-off area is now. It's a large green space. It would eliminate some trees under there, but here's the road. The road's here. The notion here is that this is the academic portion of the building on 2 stories. This is kind of that public portion of the building. The floor plan looks like that. So these are those classroom clusters. There's the learning commons in the middle, and then the public areas at one end, the auditorium, music room, gym, locker rooms, cafeteria, commons area, kitchen, and the administration area, student services, with the main entrance right adjacent to that there. There is a secondary entrance too, so there's good sort of access both day-to-day for students and in the evening for community events. And 3-dimensionally, that's what it would look like. Again, we think that, and the options that are still alive here in discussion are all 2-story options. For a lot of reasons that seem to make the most sense. It addresses the education plan well, keeps the school compact, gives it that small school feel because it is more compact and not as spread out. It is more efficient in utilizing the site. So you'll notice in all of these new construction options, we actually gain green space. There's more green space in the end than there is now there for athletic fields. And it's just a bit more economical in terms of construction and stacking of what in essence are nearly identical floor plans of the academic areas there. The second option is the one that locates it primarily on the parking lot and somewhat on the baseball field currently. And again, it's sort of the same components, it's just oriented differently. I should point out, by the way, north is to the left. And that's important in that for schools in particular, it's favorable to orient the classrooms to the south to get that natural light. And in certain times of the year, the heat gains, we get some passive heat gains from environmental reasons, and it's much easier to control glare. So both these first 2 options, the classroom wing is oriented with the major corridor running east-west. So these classrooms are on the north or the south side here, which is a principle that we strive for. Here again, this is a 2-story classroom wing. And it's forming sort of an open courtyard here. The way the plan works is like that. So there are those classroom clusters around open space. Science labs are distributed again, and the learning commons is in the middle of the building, and the larger public spaces again are on this side of the building with the main entrance. Very similar adjacencies to that other plan. It's just that it's not a linear arrangement. It sort of becomes a T-shaped circulation pattern here with classroom clusters at each end. And there's a second floor that, as I say, is nearly identical. The rest of the building is all 1 story, but some of those volumes are high. The gym is obviously a high space, the auditorium is a high space, even where the cafeteria commons is, like this room here, it deserves a high space too. And there's what it would look like 3-dimensionally. The approach would still be this drop-off is almost identical to where the drop-off is today. If you look at the orange outline, the ghost of the school is right there. The drop-off, in this case, instead of entering the existing building, is focused on the new entrance right there. So that's kind of how this building was positioned. And this angle comes up because it's parallel to the existing road. It's most efficient use of the site there. So we get about half the parking in front of the school, the other half kind of wraps around the school here. And then the variation on this, you might see, is just creates an enclosed courtyard. It's virtually the same site plan. We've just manipulated the floor plan a little bit so that now the flow is you might say circular, or, around the interior courtyard here. Otherwise, it's virtually the same as option 2A for the second floor. And there's what it looks like three-dimensionally. And then the third option is in somewhat the same general location. This one's more on the baseball field, location number 3, so it's option 3A. But here the academic wing is oriented north-south, so the classrooms are facing east and west. It's a little bit of a disadvantage to this option. It does fit the site a little easier. We're not quite as tight up here to the existing property line. But there are some other, that's one issue. And also, in this case, we have to, during construction, you can imagine we're on top of the existing parking lot. We need to create some temporary parking. We would end up building some temporary parking in front of the school, maybe to the side of the school. Ultimately, that gets replaced or thrown away in a sense. And when the building comes down, you didn't see the orange, then we could build the permanent parking in front of the school. So the site plan is a little bit different than the other one, where there's a bus loop here and a car and parking area on this side. So those are the extent of the options. The site plan is identical, the floor plan is identical to option number 1 here, with a linear corridor. So fairly straightforward plan. The second floor stacks right over the first floor. And that's what it would look like three-dimensionally. So here you get playing fields coming right up to the existing road almost. But again, the amount of green space in all these new options is roughly comparable, and the number and types of fields are roughly comparable. These were the criteria that we're now using, and if you saw that chart as you came in, we've taken these criteria and organized them into this chart, this matrix, where those criteria are listed down here. And then, in this case, we didn't put 2A.1, but the 5 options are listed across the top here. And then we tried to, on a preliminary basis, evaluate each of these options against those criteria. And again, the color coding is kind of green is good and red is bad, you might say. So green is most advantageous, the darker green, and red is least advantageous, yellow is kind of neutral. And you may not be able to read these, but again, there are copies at each of the tables, so when we break up, you can refer to them. What we'd like to point out is that the order of these criteria is somewhat weighted in the sense of the more important ones are at the top, the lesser important ones are at the bottom. But it's done in a way that you can just sort of, graphically look at it and see which are the ones that rise to the top. And one of the things to point out, we do list some costs here. Let me briefly explain that. First of all, the top numbers are construction costs. The larger numbers on the bottom row are project costs. And the difference there is construction costs, as the name implies, is all the hard materials that go into construction and the labor to build it. The bricks and mortar and concrete and steel and so forth. But in project costs, that's all inclusive. So that includes the movable furniture, the computers, the networking in the building. It includes fees for design and for project management. It includes contingencies for things that might go wrong or variations, things that typically do crop up in a construction project. So all of that is built in, and so that's why project cost is generally in the realm of 20 to 30% more than construction costs, to include all those other things in there. But you can consider project costs like a turnkey cost. And the reason they're in ranges, as I said, because we don't have a lot of detail yet, but we want to have an order of magnitude so that we can compare options to each other. One thing to notice is that for the new construction options, those are these 3, there's virtually no difference right now at this scale of detail in the construction cost. There's slight differences in the project cost because, like we said, in some options there might be a little bit more temporary parking or temporary driveway. It's relatively minor in the big scale of things, in the order of magnitude, so to speak. So these are all relatively the same. That's kind of why they're yellow. It's sort of neutral. And even this option number 4, which is an addition renovation, it's starting to approach the same cost as new construction. Partly because it has a lot of new construction. 2, it's fairly, a little more complicated and has more phasing and lasts longer in terms of construction duration. The renovation options are going to generally be in the realm of 3 years, and maybe even 3 years plus for the first one. The new construction options are more like 2 years. So they're a little bit shorter. That saves the contractor money and it's less disruptive for the school. Right now, in our preliminary analysis, the addition renovation one is slightly less in terms of cost because we are saving somewhat of the existing building. But unfortunately, you can see there's yellow and red here. It doesn't meet the education plan as well. Even though we try to manipulate things and do some renovations and reconfigurations inside the building, it's not meeting the education plan as well. And one of the other things to keep in mind, and you can talk more about this in small groups, is what exactly is the long-term value of each of these? It's not just first cost that's important. We understand that there's a cost to the district too to be concerned about because these projects are reimbursable by the MSBA, by the state, somewhat to different degrees. Some of them are more reimbursable than others. For instance, in renovations, if we do have to rent portable classrooms, the cost of that is not reimbursable by the state. If there's moving, you have to move out equipment and classroom into storage and then move it back in. That moving and storage cost is not reimbursable by the state. The temporary roadways and temporary parking, those measures are not reimbursable by the state either. So, and also the other thing to keep in mind is the state puts a cap on construction costs too. It's really, in plain English, it's artificially low. But it's just their way of kind of treating the entire Commonwealth the same. So they draw a line and say they'll reimburse whatever your percentage is up to $333 a square foot for construction costs. Our experiences in buildings like this of the quality that we all expect to last 50 years is more like $450 a square foot. So there's a significant gap there that right off the top we know is not reimbursable. So that lowers your effective reimbursement rate. And just for your thinking, the reimbursement rate for the district right now on a preliminary basis is about 54%. But the effective rate, after you take away those caps and those things that aren't reimbursed, probably more like 40%, maybe even a little less. So please don't multiply, please don't multiply, let me go back one there. These numbers by 46% and say that's going to be the district share. It's going to be more than that because the effective reimbursement is going to be lower. So it's more like 60%, at least of these numbers, these project costs, will be the district share. All that is going to be worked out in the next phase in very, in very good detail, and we'll even get to the point, on a preliminary basis of working with the building committee to calculate what each town's, portion of that would be, because it is based on enrollments and there's variable ways of calculating it, and it's hard to be specific about that. It does change over time with the enrollment, but on a preliminary basis, at least, the district can calculate what percentage each town might be responsible for of those costs. So now what we'd like to do is, if we could, I think with the groups we have.
You answer questions?
We will. I just want to explain this too. I think probably we should just gather in 2 groups maybe, or we could do 3.
I would like to have it open to everyone first,
Yeah.
if that's possible. This small group is divide and conquer. I would rather see the whole group be able to have some input, and then you can go off into.
We are going to come back together at the end and share what goes on at each table. So if you've got general questions that would be good for everyone, that would be appropriate now. Sure, sir.
I've got 3 questions on what
Okay.
you presented. I guess probably the easiest one is back, way back, you said 51% and we got it. That's not 51% of the
vote, yes.
And that's not the way anything else has been done when it comes to money in the district. It's always been 5 out of the 7, I believe, towns in the district.
Yeah, it's written into your regional agreement.
Yeah.
That's
So it's,
something that's already established.
so, is it 5 out of 7?
We've got people here from the district, so.
So it's 51%, so if everybody in the other 6 towns, every single person voted against it, and Dalton, everybody voted for it, it carries, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's a possibility, right?
Yeah, you're right. But
Okay.
it didn't.
I have a question on that same point. When the budgets are set up and the towns vote on them, then it is the majority of the towns in order for the budget to pass. So how come this project is the other way around, where it's a popular vote?
As I understand it, again, it's the way your bylaws, your whatever you call it, the
I don't understand.
district agreement is written.
I don't think that's in the district agreement.
And the only thing I can say.
But Melissa was here, the business manager.
Yeah, Liz was right here. And,
There she is.
there's a couple school committee members here, but really it was, the school committee consulted with the legal counsel. The school committee had made the decision that this was something that was going to be pursued and that we were able to vote on to do. And as a result, that's how we moved forward. So really, if I want to bring that up, I would bring that up directly with the school committee, but the regional agreement allows for it. So it was an option to move forward, which other districts and other regionals have exercised. So that was the decision.
And the vote for the feasibility study was done that same way, with basically a popular vote, 51%, not by all 7 towns.
But it wasn't a choice of the towns when you did that feasibility study, that vote setup.
No, Mass General Law does allow for either way.
That was
Did
my
you have
easy-
another
that was
gentleman?
my easy one.
Okay, did you have another gentleman?
Back to the clustering, you showed, way back when, you
Yeah,
showed
yeah.
4 clusters, basically. What is the rationale behind that? It's not, obviously it's not by grade. That'd be ridiculous.
Not necessarily, right.
So what's to be gained by that? What would be the rationale for what's in each of those 4 clusters?
Yeah, there's a couple different ways it might be organized. As you say, the school right now is evolving from a departmental organization where all the English rooms are together to a more interdisciplinary. But the idea is, one, it provides flexibility for the future. It may be set up one way when they first move in. It may be set up a different way in 10 years or 20 years. But initially, the thought is that it might be subject-oriented, where it might be humanities classroom. So English and social studies classes may be together. Or it may be STEM-oriented, where more math and science are together. Obviously, there's a science room in each one.
It's kind of the way it is now, isn't it?
No, all the math rooms are together now,
Yeah.
and all the English rooms are together now at the other end of the building. The science rooms are in another part of the building.
I misinterpreted something.
Yeah, and there's no, more importantly, there's no small group spaces or collaborative spaces to allow for those different kinds of projects to go on. They're really evolving from room or schedules where there's 45 or 50 minutes in a class, and then, like we said, kids are in, listening to lectures. They're evolving to longer classes where there might be more projects, kids get up and move, and they're not sitting in one room even necessarily. So they want to be accessible to those kind of resources nearby. That's partly the rationale for the clusters.
Yeah, just a comment. I'm retired from Berkshire Community College. The old way of teaching, where the teacher sits up in front of class and talks, that's probably the least, as far as the learning is concerned, that's the least retained. And right now, it's more of a mix. There's, as you said, there is a cross between disciplines, because a big emphasis on problem solving, where people are going to use science, they're going to use communication skills, and that's all mixed in. And also, the course content is presented by the instructor, and then they break off into groups, and they work together, and they problem solve, and they teach each other. So that's why this whole emphasis on clusters, and the colleges are doing it too.
Well, that makes sense. It's just,
It's that way in Essex, isn't it?
one more
Just a
question?
second.
Sorry, do you have one more question?
I do have one more. You showed the basic construction cost and total cost.
Yeah.
What about a life cycle cost analysis?
That's actually one of the criteria too that we list on there. We haven't calculated that yet, but we will. We'll make an estimate. We kind of limit it to utility costs because that's one thing we can measure. You know, how much heating and electricity, water, those basic utilities, we will do that.
But there's deterioration of this existing material.
Exactly.
All that stuff.
It's definitely
something more
criteria.
expensive options look actually cheap.
In the long run, that's one of the things when we talk about long-term value. Renovation might be less expensive initially, but are you going to end up spending more money down the road in 5 or 10 years sooner than you would with new construction? It's definitely something to be considered. And from an energy point of view, even though we're in a renovation, we replace all the windows, we replace the roof, we put in as much insulation as we could in those areas. That envelope is still not going to be as tight and as energy as well insulated as new buildings. So the operating costs are going to be a little bit different on those two options. That's a good point.
I have one question,
Okay.
or a statement, which I told you before the meeting. I'm a selectman from the town of Crewe, so we're trying to go to all the different meetings so we get a feel from the other towns and how they feel. I'm talking to different citizens in the towns, and they're saying they can't stand any more tax increase. There's people that are talking about moving out of the area because they cannot afford it. The jobs are going down in this area. The number that you put for students is 460. You said that could be even less for Wahconah. If you have people starting to move out of this area, we could be down to under 400 students in this proposal, and less people to pay for. So that's something that we have to consider in all the different towns. The numbers, and I just took the lowest, not the basic repairs, but the AR1 because I was told that should be reimbursed. I put the lowest numbers in, and I'm coming up with, after reimbursement, about 35 million. That's using 40%, okay, because the state 54%, but you said all the other factors in there, so I dropped it down to the lowest I could, and that's about 35 million. So
See that
that's the
number
second one
right
over,
there?
that's AR1.
I know, but see that number right there?
That's the basic repair, but that's not reimbursed at all.
Exactly. So compare that 30 million you just calculated
35.
against that number, and if no project happened, it's a good point to make that the district isn't free of any future responsibility for costs. Not that you do necessarily all of this at once, certainly we know that would get spread out over years, but still, ultimately, in a fairly short time period, we'd say 5 to 10 years, you could spend up to 30, 40 million just fixing what you have without improving.
I agree with you, I'm not
Right.
debating that, but what I'm saying is, we're in a terrible situation in this part of the state. I deal with the state all the time. I've been going to meetings in Boston, I've been trying to get more money to this end of the state. Our representatives are doing the same thing, Senator Hyde is trying to do the same thing. The problem is, the state doesn't have the money, or so they say. And
Well, the state has money for these projects, it's guaranteed. It's every one penny
yes,
out
the
of your
reimbursement,
sales tax.
right,
Yes,
percentage of reimbursements. But what I'm getting at is, right now, the towns are paying, the small towns, and I can use just Crewe as an example, are paying such high tax rates. And people complain about us spending money on our police force, on our fire department, just basic things. The school takes all the money. And I understand the reasoning, so I don't want to be a bad person with the school. We need to educate our children. But at the same time, right now there's a task force in Berkshire County, and one of their suggestions are 3 regional schools, South, Central, and North. But the towns and the districts are not listening to this task force. task force. Taconic, there's an example. Mount Greylock, there's another example. It's not happening down in South County yet, but I imagine someone's going to come up with an idea and they're going to want to build something on their own down there. It's not working. In Berkshire County, the population is going down and the jobs are leaving.
It's interesting you bring that up too, because one of the almost counterintuitive things that's come out of these meetings is because of that kind of thinking that people are saying, you know, down the road, we're going to have to consolidate regions and this, whatever comes out of this project, might actually have to take more students in the future because other schools, older ones in poorer condition, are going to close and come to Wahconah. And so we have to think about how do we expand this building, make sure that it can be expanded.
I think it's going to go the other way. I think we're going to, the
Well,
children are going to end up in Pittsfield.
If we were to build something new, it'd be hard to imagine that you'd ever, you know, close this. It'd be one of the last ones in that regard. Well, thanks. I want to use our time carefully and because we have another meeting to go to tonight, unfortunately up in Hinsdale. So
I just
we
like
want
to
to
share
allow
with
people to get into smaller groups.
A couple of us went to this first select board meeting, and we heard their financial plight, if you will. It's real, there's no doubt about it. But I want to reassure you that there's no intent to divide and conquer any thought or theory with these two groups. This is an informative session, and it's to get ideas to come forth by just...
That might have been the wrong terminology,
Yeah.
but it got everyone's attention.
Yeah, it did, but it's not right. It's not to divide and conquer. And the other thing I'd just like to point out is that this Berkshire County Collaborative, Mr. Munch, is a first-time thing. There are no state models in the whole Commonwealth to support what they're trying to do. And I'm not condemning the effort. The effort is a first of its kind. And so they're looking for a foundation on which to move forward. And they, as you probably noticed in the reportage, some of that momentum has been lost because there are no models for them to go by. And in regard to the data on the low of financial opportunities around here, not everybody's hurting. And as far as the votes that you challenged, it's our job to bring this opportunity to the voters, regardless of how anybody thinks or can plan their financial situation right now. We owe the parents the opportunity to see what they want to do for the further education of their kids. Plain and simple. So we got to go through the process, whatever the end is.
I'm not debating it, Tom. If we debating it at all, so I'm not your enemy.
No.
I'm just trying to get the point across that the towns are really struggling. I mean, you know, Washington, no fire department. I read the newspaper, you know. But we know what's going on. So
I want to let people know, if you get up and rearrange, there's also some refreshments there for somebody who wants to bring. But we'd really like to see if we can push a couple tables together so it looks more like this. Maybe it's going to be hard to get more than, 5 people or something at a table. So these all right up. Sure. I feel better. Might be able to see the sky, but otherwise you'd be looking at a building. And even for the nice building, Yeah. Yes. This is sort of the opposite. The district, trying to roll and something like 5. The district is their own one is school more the state, all the they project it's not saying like any one particular year, but at least 10 years in their minds, the right
You know what? What do you think you want to do it? Talk to her. Straight for anything
that's a little more negotiable enrollment.
I know
build more space easily without displacing that. Much less. Just like you do in buildings, you can we call it this Becket, technical education.
Have you
That's why Berkshire Community College is behind advanced manufacturing and supporting those.
It's an important town, and areas. And yeah, they have to adjust based on.
They have the exposure in high school, had some hands-on learning, and they had draft demos, and I always enjoyed building these decisions. If they didn't offer that, I had to go totally expect I probably wouldn't stay high.
No, but I mean, that's what they have.
So that's just kind of in terms of my two cents on impact on our lives. That's why we go education on
There you go. With the open for your
Looks like a what? Prison? I like just the aesthetics.
We're a little concerned about the existing building, so one of the buildings is set
But at the same time,
it's like two versions.
for now, that's function, people sit in this like that. But when it's
The one that has a right by the road.
Yeah, that's, well, it
and mark them because of that. Yeah, upgrade your Wi-Fi, which eventually get more. So that's our advantage.
the other name for brand is that from natural pricing energy.
But we do not.
From the criteria that are listed here,
When you're talking about.
obviously we heard from several supporters that, the impact on
Where our heads are.
taxpayers is like one of the highest criteria. Are there others that you
I think long-term value and operating costs.
That's what we're saying, that's why I say that's very good for the teachers and that's why we're neutral, and then neutral on although again, DJ was driving by the window, so. Oh, we have to leave? Time's up. There's a custodian here somewhere, who can tell us whether that was real or not. I think there may be some things that we throw away. If you look at option number 2, right here, we can build all that parking and use it as temporary parking. So again, one of the subtle pieces, one of the reasons it's called a little better.
The classrooms are based on
The quarter is working in the right way. The best way. It's not too bad, but it's not part of the road. It's being a band room, has to be and then there's the blank for all the back of the state. That'll be where it says Wahconah Regional High School. If you look at this side, the corner of the front is a big blank wall on two sides. Unfortunately. So again, from this testimony, this corner is the most visible thing. A little bit of a challenge for us around it. And on this one, this decision is very
Well, I can really, I mean, if all
So maybe we get a wrap up. We started zooming in on which is the best options of the ones on the table. People did focus on the new construction first of all, and there was some discussion on the 2A option, which has either the open and closed courtyard, and we recognize that the difference is really about security and about traffic flow inside the school. Security probably could be addressed on the exterior with a fence, and maybe there are some more positive things to keeping it open. So in the end, there was some support for 2A. But there's also some support for 1A too. I don't want to lose track of that there. And we should keep in mind, try to be flexible, not just to think about potential expansion, but what happens if the enrollments decline? And how does the design respond to that? And we don't want to lose track that hands-on learning is still important at this building, programmatically, whatever kind of tech ed spaces and rigor spaces that we have. It's still important in this district. So those are a couple things we had. Someone summarized here.
Yeah. So we have one question I hadn't heard yet. A question about snow in courtyards. I think Aaron addressed it. The concern is we get so much snow in Berkshire, and what do you do with the snow in courtyards? We talked a lot about LEED silver, solar. There's a real desire to put solar, hopefully offset costs. One thing I didn't share with the group, but at the CONIC, I'm involved with the CONIC project, we're probably going to get close to $600,000 in incentives back from utility companies because we're using very high efficiency everything.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be that much, you know, you scale buildings, but I assume we'd go after those, those rebates there as well. Initially, we heard that we liked 3A, but I think we also liked the 2s. And we had the same debate about the courtyards, whether they're good for security was the question. We talked about the benefit of NC 2A and the ability to build permanent parking lots first versus having to build temporary parking lots which aren't reimbursable. So there's some benefit to the taxpayers on them. We also talked about how do you plan for future technology changes. It just changes everything. I can remember 10 years ago I didn't have a cell phone. I too. So how do you deal with that in the future in the building? We talked about maybe upsizing conduit runs so you can pull additional or future internet service or whatever. And then we talked about if the population really did decline, could this turn into a 7 through 12 school? And how do you do that? Aaron addressed that a little bit, and seemed to think that the pods would lend themselves to possibly doing that in the future. And we also talked about preventative maintenance, the need to have a preventative maintenance plan in place so you avoid the cost of repairs. The shut-off valves that don't work in toilets and things of that nature. So, okay. We'll move that into the program.
We also mentioned life cycle analysis, which is important feature for this new project.
So, that's what we wanted to cover tonight. I want to leave you with this too. As I said, the district does a good job of getting information out there. There's a lot of different ways to get it. And for those, I think you were mentioning for your town too, if your town's website could link to these websites. A lot of this information that we have tonight, eventually it will be on these websites too for people who didn't attend tonight.
The chart that you have, the color chart, is that on one of these websites?
I don't think it is yet.
Is there a way of getting a copy of that in color?
It will be on the websites soon, in color. All these options will be on there, this whole presentation that we had tonight. Eventually be linked to these websites. So.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is before anything gets changed, just that sheet.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay,
This
okay,
exact
okay.
Presentation will be available.
This is about a week, maybe 2 weeks old.
Yeah.
I think we still want to talk with the building committee about how the ratings were, so there may be a little change, so I think we'd like to do that before we circulate.
The other thing I'll add too is that all of these forums have been videotaped by the school district, and they're going to be up on the website so that you can actually, one of the interesting things, the reason why we're doing 4 forums is basically so that we don't have to make people come to us, we can go to people, given the fact that we have a 7-time district, physically large district. So you can actually watch the video and see what the Windsor Covington meeting was like. You can watch the video and see what the Hinsdale Peru or Dalton meetings were like as well. And you can see, get even more global sense as to what the feedback's done. So, of course, if you've got an infinite amount of time to do that. I just let you know that it's on the video.
So thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you.